Hey, thank you guys for coming, your interest. I apologize that this room is full, the overflow room is full. But if you're here for item number 5 on the agenda, will you raise your hand?
What is 5?
5 is the Choctaw Marie Street Drive. Okay. So not as many as the overflow room. So what Mr. Keener has, I think, decided to do or has indicated that we may move number 5 up to number 1 to just facilitate the group that we have and get back into compliance with the COVID situation that we find ourselves in, if that's agreeable, sir. Okay. Now, of the ones that in here that are going to address number 5, do you happen to have a group spokesperson, or do you plan on addressing it individually? Individually. Because a lot of times, you know, when there's such a large group, you do have a spokesperson. I mean, there's a common theme. Obviously, that's going to be up to Mr. Keener, how many people he hears, and his rules of order. So I'll leave that up to him. But it is good to know, you know, what the intent is. All right, having said that, Mr. Keener, okay. I've already addressed the other group in the same manner. When you get ready to hear speakers, if you'll let me know, I'll facilitate it in any way you can.
Okay.
All right?
I guess you're the folks in here.
I will probably bring them in here. That way you can hear them personally.
We'll hear these folks in here.
Yes, sir.
Once we're out, everybody's spoken that's in this room, and I'll ask you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
We'll call the meeting to order at 5:35. Drew, would you provide our invocation, please?
Pray with me, please. Father God, we are always grateful to be in your presence and be able to serve our community. Father God, I ask that you just give us discernment for what is best. Father God, for our folks that we serve, Lord, I ask that you give us wisdom and guidance. And Father God, we just also want to give you thanks for every good thing that you have given in our lives, knowing that you are the source. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Roll call, please.
Whitney Kerr.
Here.
Shane Knight.
Here.
Clint Horner.
Here.
Drew Jackson.
Here.
Kevin Keener.
Here. Our first order of business is consideration of our approval of our minutes from our December 15th, 2020 meeting. Do we have a motion for those?
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Whitney Kerr.
Aye.
Shane Knight.
Aye.
Clint Horner.
Aye.
Drew Jackson.
Aye.
Kevin Keener.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we move item number 5 to the first or to the next item, number 2, and then follow number 4, reverting after to the original as planned.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to rearrange the agenda. Call for a vote, please.
Whitney Kerr.
Aye.
Shane Knight.
Aye.
Clint Horner.
Aye.
Drew Jackson.
Aye.
Kevin Keener.
Aye. All right, so we'll move to item number 5. It's consideration of case PC 2021-05. Request approval of rezoning from R1 single family to the C2 highway commercial and commercial recreation district located near Choctaw Street and Marie Drive. Ms. Barker?
Good evening. This is a rezoning request to zone a small piece of property. We have the PowerPoint here in a minute that will show exactly what we're talking about. To zone a piece of property from R1 to C2. The reason that they're wanting to do this is eventually this is to go with a development that they are planning down the road. And that part of the development is going to be a larger kind of senior facility, that type of thing. But for this piece of property, they're looking at having a detention pond and a parking lot placed there. There will be screening that is required. That's going to be to the that'll separate where the houses are and the and where the detention pond and or the parking lot is. There's a little leg piece that goes in the middle between the two houses. They're looking at having a walking trail there. The concerns that staff have at this point in time regarding this is the fact that just looking at this piece alone, which we have to only consider that small piece because it is not combined with the larger piece. So looking at that one piece, it does not have ingress or egress off of Choctaw, which it would be required to if they were to for that one particular lot per ordinance. The additional, there was some confusion early on when they submitted a plat that showed that that piece was joined with the other piece when it was not. We found no evidence that was ever combined, that there's ever any platting that occurred with that particular piece on that. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, then we'll move forward.
Ms. Parker, I think I probably have a number of questions.
Sure.
One, obviously, this is an irregular shaped lot.
It is.
It has a number of issues, including, proximity to the other houses,
Yes.
et cetera. Part of this is, I'd like you to refresh my memory. We have seen this piece of property. I've seen it at least 3 times.
Okay.
So it's come a number of times, through here. From the original being, Burridge, continuing to move, further west. What has been the development, in terms of records of how this has played out?
What we have on record is that there was a larger plat that was completed of where, it's basically to the east of this property here. It's a large kind of triangle-shaped lot. That was rezoned to C2 and was platted at one point in time. That was probably in the last, I believe that was around 2015 that we found. So that was completed. That's the main records that we have. The other is just this piece that was added onto a warranty deed, which is, you can have different pieces of property on a warranty deed. But the issue again is that there was no real platting that we saw done on this piece of property. And then obviously, the issue with having that lot line going essentially right over or right next to a person's house, ordinarily that would not be allowed in a normal platting process, because there'd be setbacks and things like that would have to be adhered to per city ordinance. So the city attorney and I also had several quite lengthy discussions this afternoon too, and he's kind of here to help us through if we need him. But that's kind of the concerns of the city, and you guys kind of read the staff report on that, but I'd happy to answer any questions. But that's kind of the summary.
I don't know if the next question is better for you or Mr. Markham, but, I guess my curiosity is, how does this irregular non-conforming lot, how did it come to existence?
That's a good question. The answer is apparently the whoever owned the piece of property at that point in time just created it.
Is
That's the
there
only thing we
any,
come up with.
is there any review process as those things are being drafted?
Normally,
Filed?
or
Another filed at the, county clerk's office, but is there any sort of review or approval process?
ordinarily the city would hear it, obviously, but I don't know what the county has on their level to, once they hear the item, how that pertains. Normally, it's, in our ordinances say that they can't even file a plat unless, or a deed, or with, unless there's a, the process has been done. But obviously, that's not a plat, obviously, there's no plat on file, but I don't know. Mr. Markham might be able to answer the question about the deed.
The short answer is a buyer and a seller can make a deed and file it with the county clerk without ever going through any review process from the city. Was it proper? Probably not. There were essentially, if memory serves, there were two lots, two meets and bounds defined lots, not part of any platted area. This lot doesn't sit on any area that's ever been platted. So there were two lots with houses at the north end of the lots and then sort of a larger area toward the south. They were under common ownership, and the owner apparently basically executed 3 deeds, one to each homeowner with the north portion of the lot, and then reserved that southern part within a sort of a neck for ingress and egress to Choctaw as a third parcel. But under normal circumstances, that would be a situation where you would have to go in and do either a lot split or something, because even though it's a meets and bounds plotted area and not platted, you still would have to go through the lot split process. That was not done. But that did not involve any of the current owners. So I'm not sure that the city has any recourse at this point, but it probably wasn't done properly, and that's how these what I say 3 lots, one that's at issue here tonight, and then the 2 lots with the homes came into being. Is it was just the seller, who was the common owner of those 3 lots, deeded them off to other people. They were filed with the county clerk, and the city really never had notice.
And what can or should be done to, correct? So you're saying this was like the little sliver along Chuckwall, was that created on the deed when they sold the 2 houses?
It looks like it. So it looks like there were two lots, 2 rectangular lots. When the, I'll call it the easternmost lot with the house on it, it was sold, the house was a smaller portion of that overall lot, and cut off that portion that accesses Chuckwah from the southern lot. Just a review of the deeds, it looks like all of that neck that goes up to Chuckwah from the subject lot is contained within that eastern lot that was sold off. I don't think it straddles the previous property lines. I think it's all within what was formerly the eastern lot.
Do we have any idea what the intent of this carve-out is?
With the intent of what?
Of this carve-out?
I can only speculate. It looks like it was to provide access to Chuckwah from the southern portion of the property, but that's just speculation.
Ms. Barker, I guess probably sorry, I've got a bunch of questions. One, you may have to remind me, it seems like when we had heard this before that, that what was agreed to was that there would not be access to Chuckwah, but that access would be derived from one of the other main thoroughfares. Is that true?
Right now, as the property sits, that can't be true for purposes of consideration tonight, because it's a separate piece of property. The lot at issue tonight with the pond and the parking lot there stands alone. It's not been joined with the property to the east that is a platted portion. What may be a little bit confusing that you'll probably hear is that this lot, the subject lot, and the larger platted lot to the east was conveyed to the current owner in one deed and one property description. So they had all of it surveyed, made one long property legal description that incorporated both the platted lot and this subject lot in one long property description. The current owner probably is justified in believing that this is all one piece of property, but you can't take a platted lot and an unplatted lot and combine them into one property description, and it turns into a platted lot or a single piece of property for your purposes. For the owner's purposes, he owns both property, or that entity owns both properties, and it's a perfectly valid way to legally convey title. But it doesn't change the fact that for municipal purposes, they are 2 separate lots. And so, unless there is some sort of easement or a grant of ingress and egress from the owner of the large parcel, who's the same owner, by the way, but the only point of ingress and egress that, my opinion, that this commission can consider tonight is that neck that goes up to Chuckwah. Because while it likely won't happen, this commission has to assume that if this is granted tonight or recommended, the property owner could turn around and sell this piece of property to a third party. And the only ingress and egress is north to Chuckwah. So, but I think that would be different if this parcel had been previously a replat request and this parcel was joined with the platted property into a single piece of platted property. Then ingress and egress could come from somewhere other than this neck that sticks up toward Chuckwah. It could come from somewhere else on Chuckwah further to the east, or from the private drive even further to the east that goes behind Applebee's and IHOP. But right now, because this parcel stands on its own and hasn't been joined for purposes of zoning and plating with the larger parcel next to it that's under common ownership, I think this commission can only consider the ingress and egress of that small part that accesses Choctaw.
Thank you.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Markham, on, so if we have a non-conforming lot, which is what I'd consider what we're looking at, can it be joined with the conforming platted lot that's next to it through our either lot split or replat process? So can non-conforming, can they be adjoined to a platted lot through our normal process of replats?
I believe the answer to that is yes, and I think staff agrees that the answer to that is yes. If there was a replat request, I don't think there would be any problem given the sort of similar nature of the parcels, and the location of them. I believe there could certainly be a combination of the two, and then you would have one large platted lot.
Okay.
It would still have two zoning characteristics for a particular time unless there was a change in that, but it would still be one zoned parcel.
Okay.
Or one platted parcel, I'm sorry, one platted parcel.
So my other question is my understanding on whether it's residential, commercial, whatever zoning, that the parcel needs to abut a publicly dedicated right-of-way or street. And when so it abuts that, it does do that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, my understanding of it is at the building line, so where they could start building, that a C2 lot would be required to have 100 foot of frontage.
Correct.
On that abutted street. So if I don't know if I am correct in that, then this is a non-conforming residential, non-conforming commercial, it's non-conforming in any zone. And from that alone, it would look like to me that it can't be, I don't know, you can do anything with it, rezone it, and until it's combined. If they can combine it, until it's combined, it doesn't look like you could. So I'm asking if I'm going
Yeah,
down
I
the
mean,
right.
I think that's certainly one argument and one interpretation. I don't know that there's extremely clear guidance on that. There are other parcels that have less than 100 feet of frontage on the actual street, but are accessed by an appropriate drive, that are commercial in nature. So I don't know that the frontage actually has to directly abut. It would have to be, certainly would have to be at least 100 foot wide parcel, which this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 300 feet wide by 100 or so feet deep on that back part of it. So my opinion is the frontage doesn't necessarily have to directly abut the street. I think maybe the common and really my interpretation of frontage has always been it directly abuts the street. I think there are probably other circumstances where we could find commercial properties that may not directly border the street, but have an appropriate drive and are appropriately zoned commercial, but may not directly abut the public street.
I just reading the ordinance earlier that just seemed like to me that it needed to be at the building line. That seemed to be the reference point of where this frontage. So that was my interpretation. So
Yeah,
that's why I asked the question.
I don't disagree with that interpretation necessarily. I don't think that's an out of line interpretation.
Okay.
That's my understanding is that as well, and it does reference in the ordinances, I think, and it's been a while since I've read it, but it does reference an example of a wedge-shaped lot.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you may not have 100 feet at the road, but you are required to have that 100-foot width at the building line. And I think that's the example that it references in the ordinance. So,
That's correct.
so with that, I'm under the same understanding that we may not have to have 100 feet touching the street, but we would have to have 100 feet at the building line for a C2.
Sure.
Or 70 feet for an R1, or whatever whatever we're looking at.
And I will mention that a representative of the applicant is also here, if you have questions for them.
Anything further? from
Any
you?
other questions so far? Thank you. You want to say some more?
No.
Okay. We do typically, after the staff's presentation, allow the applicant to speak if the applicant has anything they'd like to say in regard to the application. If you would give us your name, please, when you get to the mic.
My name is Pt.1, and I represent Cares Health, who are the owners of this property. We were aware that this was zoned residential. We were just not aware that we were going to need a zoning change to put a detention pond and some paving for parking on it, and that's our mistake. We never intended to put a structure on this particular piece of land. The piece of land is important to us because everybody around us are draining onto our land, so we are going to have to address that in order to have a stable soil environment. And so when you see the detention pond that's there, it's a complement to another detention pond that's at the other end of the property that will be interconnected, so we can hold on to the water and release it more gradually. Because right now it runs out of the other detention pond over the street when it's raining really hard. As far as the parking is concerned, it's for the staff parking for the nursing home, and that was our intended use. And obviously we're learning we need to take some additional steps in terms of our platting and so on, and we'll obviously initiate that right away. We already have the surveys and to present the actual documentation with, so it's something we could push forward quickly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for
Any questions?
the applicant?
Sorry, I need to turn my mic on. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the intended use. What should we expect should be built there, and how is that going to affect the environment there?
Well, I mean, we have a master plan for the overall piece of property, and I've been told I should only focus on this today, but I don't mind. We have already shared the overall plan with the city, and it consists of, we own the King's Daughters and Sons nursing home here in town, and we're going to relocate that to this property. That part of it will be located up at the side of the property that abuts Choctaw. And then on the part that runs along Town Center Boulevard, we are planning to put in outpatient services and medical retail. We hope to have an outpatient dialysis clinic there, pharmacy, dentist, optometrist, and so on, in order to serve the community, but also to serve because we will have a resident population that need those services. And at a later date, we hope to add an assisted living facility on a plot that's been set aside for that. It's a little premature to get into that, but that is our intent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to, I know there's no shortage of opposition, I don't believe, so if we'll, I guess, who wants to go first? Mr. Haddock, maybe? This gentleman back here, go ahead, sir. You also, when you get here, if you'll give us your name, please, for our records.
Yes, sir. My name is Justin Heater. I'm not here for any questioning or back and forth banter. I just have some concerns that I want addressed publicly and on the record. There's multiple issues with this proposal that would cause hardship and unrest to the residents in this single-family residential district. First of all, the additional the addition of a business entry point on a residential street, creating an increased traffic to the residential street, which already deals with an overflowing traffic from University Boulevard, especially during rush hour, school zones, all that. It would result in an influx of pass-through traffic and an addition of business traffic on a street that is already poorly regulated and poorly patrolled. The residents of the neighborhood have already had to be on high alert for speeding motorists with our children and pets outside. The addition of a retention pond will certainly increase animal, reptile, and insect-related pests, and in the event of a heavy rainstorm, it would cause flooding, and the likelihood of damage to residential properties and homes would be pretty substantial. As you can see on the display, my wife and I are actually in the property that has that slant. So we are going to be completely boxed in by commercial property. The introduction of that walkway literally takes any passerby within a yard of our living room windows. I mean, you can see that there is almost no easement from my home. As stated a moment ago, if that parking lot is for employees, I'm not entirely sure why there even needs to be a walkway to the public street, the residential street. And that's about the end of my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Harold Haddock. I'm an adjacent landowner. Excuse me. I'm coming before this group for probably about the 15th time because I've been fighting this piece of property for 15 years. Let me go back to some of the things that we have a problem with that I think the city should take into consideration before we ever consider anything on this property. And that is, it's a flood zone. Now, if you've driven out to this piece of property and observed those, the bank was first built. Its parking lot has an outlet where all the water comes off the parking lot right into this property. The Dodge House built it. All its parking lot goes right across this thing. The restaurants that are built, you go up there and look at their driveways, come out on the street dumps back on this property. All the water coming from the hospital comes down through that ditch and ends up in the same place. This is the 15th time that I've asked that a engineered report on this piece of property for flooding to be done. There's never been any engineering on this property with all the zoning that's gone on it. We still have a problem that is gets worse. Every time you build something on it and you put a foot of concrete on it, you just rush this water. I've got pictures here. We had a major rain 5 years ago where the parking lot, this pond, all north, clear up past the Dodge House, was all flooded. It was a lake out there. It got so high that it was going over the street of Chuckwall. That's how much the water was backed up, because the retaining pond down there was useless. It was flooded. So that's my request first, is that no more permits be permitted until we have an engineering report. That encompasses 40 acres with no plan whatsoever. You got this 20 acres that was originally the Wheeler property. And then you got the 20 acres up on University comes down. All that water comes to the south. You got a ditch along the front, along Chuckwall. It carries all the water off of them, comes back down, comes down the road, comes right back into this same property. All of it generates right back. So there's 40 acres with no study. Okay. Enough of that. The other thing that we complained about before is the traffic that you're going to create on Chuckwall. It's too much right now. Chuckwall is a residential street. It's not a designed street to carry traffic. Matter of fact, when you get up on University and Estelle, that street is an alley. Check your records. The entrance off of University is 20 feet. That's what the city calls an alley. If I put an alley in a silly street down here, ordinance on it says it's 20 feet. It's not capable of carrying the traffic that this keeps doing. And the more you build, the more traffic we get. So this has been hodgepodge from the very beginning. It's time that we stop, take a look at it, and do this thing properly. Let's start with an engineering report. No one should be able to object to that because people, Alan Wheeler owned it. He sold all his property off. He's out. Now, who's going to take care of this pond? Whose responsibility is it? Every business there is dumping into it. But who's responsible for that pond to maintain it? Right now, it's not being maintained. It's filled up 3 or 4 feet. And it's full of weeds. It won't hold the water that it was first designed for. So let's start with that engineering report and then consider Chuckwall and its, we as a neighborhood request that there be no egress on the Chuckwall because that's a beautiful residential area. They're protruding into the area. They have a good street out in front. Why do they need to come to Chuckwall? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions? Anybody want to see these pictures? Kevin's seen them. He knows what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we able to come in together?
You can. We are going to have to keep it to about 3 minutes if we can, so we can get lots of folks in.
Okay, thank you. My name is Matthew Cortinas. I live at 2601 Chuckwall. That's the big property there. I'll just tell you a real quick story. When we bought the property, the way it was advertised, I mean, it's just kind of a moot point, but the way it was advertised, we assumed we were getting everything all the way to where the property line is at the back of the Dodge house. When in reality, originally we were offered 6 inches off of our driveway down the side and 8 inches off the back, which would have given us a nice sized yard, but it was, you know, from what I understood, there was going to be a rezoning proposition, and I heard that it was shot down. Bearing that in mind, the position of the detention pond as it stands right now is not being taken care of. My neighbor and myself, to the left of me there, have been pretty much responsible for keeping that mowed down. I got a hold of an email to a person from Caris and periodically would have to email them to remind them to please mow the grass. And I have spent money of my own paying someone to brush hog that area. When left to its own devices, the grass gets because it holds water, the grass gets very thick, very lush, and we start seeing rats and whatnot. So as it stands right now, it appears to be a pond already. And the added influx of water in that area is not going to be beneficial for that. Had we known that this is what we were looking at, we would not have bought this property. We were attracted to this property. Choctaw is a beautiful street. It's a very old, established neighborhood. Neighbors are wonderful, but I mean, this was just, you know, it's just kind of ridiculous as it stands. The walkway in between my house and Mr. Heater's house, I don't know about you guys, but it makes me very nervous to know that someone can just walk down in between my house. I guarantee you, if any one of you guys had someone walking in between you and your neighbor's house, the law would be there pretty quickly. It's just not cool. When it rains, the water runs down Choctaw, runs down my driveway and out the back. So we're doing that, and then we're adding a walkway. I just don't see how this is going to work. I don't see how this is going to work. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
My name is Shanna Cortinas. I just want to say on the record, to reiterate a little bit, when we bought our property, it was a nice, well-established neighborhood. We have 3 children, one who is deaf and is blind. So I'm opposed to it because, one, it's going to create traffic that now I have to be concerned about her being able to walk down our own street. So I would like to propose, if you're going to approve this, that somebody puts up some kind of speed bump or something along Choctaw so that it's not just a main thoroughfare that people can fly down, and with the additional traffic that's going to be put in there, as well as having fences put around so that now I don't have to worry about myself having to look at a parking lot or a ditch, because that's what we already have going on. So, and when I want to be able to sell my property at some point, I'm sure the future, homeowners aren't going to want to look at that as well. So I am absolutely opposed to it. I think it's ridiculous to even propose. So I don't want people to be able to just walk down my street or walk down in between the 2 houses. Like he said, that's where our garage is, that's where our cars are stored, that's where all of my personal property is, and now it's just going to be a public street. So I hope that you guys can just consider, if it was your home, you would not want this. I understand that it's a business venture, but these are residents, and we have paid money to live on the street with the expectation that we would be able to live in a residential neighborhood. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I can't follow that up, so I will thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you.
Kevin, before you let anybody else come up, just to kind of short circuit, if we can cut off 30 minutes to an hour of this, I know at least 3 of us have heard basically the same piece of property when we were talking about redezoning the 2 houses that are there, and we just shot it down. Shane, you live in that neighborhood, so I think I'm familiar with your position. Clint, I don't remember if you were with us or not, but do any of us like this proposal? I mean, is this something that we really need to hear? I'm just saying, I know where at least 3 of us were before. I know where member number 4 is. I don't know where you are, Clint, but at this point, my position is, last time we took up this proposition, we discussed the 2 houses. We spent hours at this meeting talking about community concerns, all the concerns with that neighborhood, that area, and we purposely left those 2 houses and kind of this chunk as a buffer zone. Everything else was already commercial. There wasn't really anything we could do about that, and I understand there will be business on the rest of that chunk, but my issue is we purposely left this to be something of a buffer zone so that we didn't intrude any more into the neighborhood, and that was why we turned down rezoning the 2 house areas that are there that have since been sold to other people. I'm comfortable with making a motion to deny this at this point in time because, to me, this is still kind of part and parcel of that same piece of property, the same issue. So I don't want to undercut it if somebody else needs to hear or wants to hear from more people. I'm just saying I'm comfortable making that motion considering everything that we heard prior, all the prior concerns. To me, this was supposed to be a buffer zone, and we meant for that to be that purpose, so that's why I'm making a motion to deny.
I guess I do have a comment or maybe some discussion, before we consider any motions, if that's acceptable. From my standpoint, this piece of property has been a nuisance. We've talked about this multiple times, multiple reasons. To me, it's obvious the intention on why this carve-out was done. There has been some requests for information, by the community and by the public that has not been answered. There was not proper notice, for some of the residents. And so rather than, a motion to deny, I would rather have a motion to table, to allow time to document what the answers not only have been in the past, but to have them well documented before they go to council, in an effort to try to provide some clarity on what has been agreed to, what has been promised to the community versus what is rumor or desire. And so obviously this piece of property is non-conforming, and it's almost a self-imposed hardship. Approval, for me, speaking to your comments, I would not be in favor of approval, but I am in favor of taking the time to document and, have a well-established answer before we submit this to council. I think there's been, from my perspective, there's been a number of instances where we push something through to council with remaining tasks and work to be done and documented that have come back to us years later with still some of the same issues. And so to me, as a member of this committee, of this commission, I feel more comfortable having something well documented and established so that when we have a recommendation, council knows where we stand and why, and I don't feel like we're there.
I would like to speak to the notification that you mentioned. The notices were mailed out properly and placed in the newspaper properly. It was an issue apparently with the post office that we can never foresee what may or may not happen within that. And as far as the public information requests, all of them have been completed to the fullness of what staff has as of today. So.
Well, and I apologize. I didn't mean to insinuate that the office hadn't done it. I just know that some of the members some of the members of the community have expressed they didn't receive it.
You're correct, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. That way people knew.
I didn't mean to insinuate.
No. I knew you didn't. I was just letting the people know because I meant to mention that earlier and I just failed to.
Thanks for
So.
the clarification. My apologies.
And as a note, we'll have to do, unless you guys are ready for a motion, we'll have to do the recess here in just a little bit because we're already.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with your thoughts, and I don't have the exact documentation, but I believe Mr. Haddock may remember even when it was, but I know it's not regarding this specific piece, but the one next to it, there's maybe some promises or from times past. I think that's what Mr. Jackson's talking about, that let's go through these, let's get them documented, let's get everybody on the same page. And so
I personally would appreciate some sort of timeline of when it was heard, what the decision was, were there promises, et cetera, so that we can finally put this thing to bed.
what kind of time frame do we need to get those documents? Can we have them by next meeting?
Well, we can table for a month, and if they're not ready, we can table again.
Okay. Mrs. Knight, would you like to?
I was just gonna ask, there are a lot of us here who really want to make sure that it goes on the record. We've been doing our homework, and there's a lot of history for you all to know. So I really appreciate that you're willing to consider that. But the history of.
If you would come to the mic, just so the folks in the overflow can hear what you're saying, please.
I'm Lindsay Knight. I live 2622 Chuckwaw Drive. Thank you for hearing all of us. The reason that many of us know that are newer to the neighborhood, or I grew up there, but about what happened is because everyone came and spoke in front of you all. So a lot of the history about this property is on the record because we were able to say to you our concerns. So knowing that you may want to consider this and table it for a future discussion, is there an opportunity for us to meet with you all as a committee or individually so that we can share with you our feelings? Or maybe we can sign a document now showing that we all want to go on the record that we oppose this, since we're all here, but we may not have the opportunity to speak. I want to go on the record. You can put me in there on the record. I oppose this adamantly, and I have a prepared statement. I understand we have a timeline, but I think it's really important that you understand the level of opposition.
What,
And to the gentleman with Karis,
Yeah.
the neighborhood wants to welcome businesses to the neighborhood because we recognize that there's a future, but we want to talk about the history and how we might be able to work together.
Sure.
Because the way it's been done is everybody's done. We're done. We're done being, done playing nice.
Something we may consider is go ahead and recessing so that we can address the regional, come back to this, and at least those people who have things that need to be documented for the next.
We want to do that before we have any more discussion on this?
We can, but I was gonna answer her, we can do the recess in the middle if we need to, but I was gonna answer all of the letters that have been submitted and emails have already been documented in place. So,
There's probably a dozen more of us here, so.
right, and so if there's more people that need to be heard, then that's up to these guys on how they wanna handle that specifically. We can do a tabling, we can do a special meeting, we can do other options, we can do, however you guys wanna do that, there are options, so I was gonna just let you
Is there an
know.
option to meet with, like, neighbors or folks of concern, outside of a regular meeting like this, or do we need to have it?
You'd have to have a special meeting if you want all of you together. Anytime there's more than 3 of you together, you have to have a special meeting, so we can do that, we just have to have a special meeting, and it has to be publicized, so.
If you would remind me, how many of the commissioners can meet without,
Less than 3, so
less
2,
than 3?
1 or 2, without being considered a
So it would
quorum.
be possible to have a meeting with some representatives of the commission.
If there's 1 or 2, then it wouldn't be a meeting.
I don't want to speak for Tom Markham since he's the city attorney, but I'm telling you from a legal perspective, oh, that's such a bad idea. Such a
Right,
bad
it's,
idea.
preferably, and I won't speak for Tom either, but preferably if.
Tom speak for Tom. It's a real bad, it is a real bad idea to, it's certainly a good idea to get the pulse of the community and the surrounding area. Even though it may not, your intent may not be to technically violate the Open Meeting Act. Whenever you start talking about sort of officially planning to meet with people as commissioners, you start to approach that line. So, because basically anything that gives the appearance of an official act of the commission really needs to be done in a public meeting. So you could have an official meeting that is just a forum on this issue. But you really need to, unless it's just individually calling or taking appointments with a citizen, it would be inadvisable to say, okay, let's 2 of us get together and meet with people to get their opinions, even though that's all well-meaning. It really starts to approach that Open Meetings Act violation. You don't want that. So.
Now, Tom, if they're talking about doing a tabling, could they do a table to a special meeting? And would that take care of the public notification piece of that?
I don't think so. I
No,
don't
okay,
think,
I don't
because
think
there's
so
not,
either, but I wanna
because
make
there's
sure.
not a scheduled meeting.
Right, okay. I didn't think so either, wanted to.
Yeah, I think you could table it to the next regular meeting, or you could have to, you would have to republicize to a special meeting.
Okay, that's what I kinda figured. But I knew they was gonna ask me, so. And I didn't wanna play Tom.
Okay. We had another meeting that was supposed to start at 6 o'clock, so if everybody will just hang loose here for like about a minute, we're gonna have to recess this meeting and do some just procedural stuff for just a second. It'll only take just a moment or two. So, she's telling me to hang on a minute for some reason. Ms. Barker, were you telling me to hold on?
You're good,
Oh,
I
is
was
that-
making sure we had our people.
I didn't know that was which one those are. That's hold on or you're good? Okay.
I had to make sure people were
Okay.
good.
Chief Hauser?
Peter, do you have time for one speaker from the other room?
We will right after this. So, yeah, if we have anybody that wants to speak from the overflow room, if you could facilitate that, please, but we'll be right back with you in about, just stay right there.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recess this meeting in favor of the Regional Planning Commission meeting.
Second. Motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Aye.
Shane Knight,
Aye.
Clint Horner,
Aye.
Drew Jackson,
Aye.
Kevin Keener.
Aye. We'll call the Regional Planning Commission to order at 6:25.